How's it going, everybody? It's Tech-Tard Ted on Tuesday, the 27th of September. Yep, the polls are closed. The referendum is history. And by sometime tomorrow, we'll all know what the deal is. Now, I'll go ahead and make a suggestion or a prediction, which I'm fairly confident in because I don't see any other way this can go. I imagine that all four regions will end up joining the Russian Federation sometime this week, possibly even tomorrow. There will be an ultimatum given to the Ukrainians to leave the territory of the Russian Federation, which will include all of Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson districts. In other words, get the fuck out. Now, I look for the Ukrainians to say, oh, no, fuck you, that's our land, and to continue to go on. But what will happen? Well, I imagine that the special military operation will cease and the ATO will begin, the ATO, anti-terrorist operation, since there is a very, very easy case to be made when you bomb nuclear reactors, you shell nuclear reactors, you send missiles to nuclear reactors, you drop mines in residential neighborhoods in Donetsk, and do all the happy, joy things that the Ukrainians are doing, including arresting and torturing school teachers and policemen, all the happy, kind, and gentle pro-democracy things they do, that it's going to be real easy for the Russians to say, hey, they're terrorists, we're going to have to knock this shit out. And it's just going to devolve. Now, the Russian call-up is going a lot quicker than a lot of people figured. Are there people crossing the border? Yes, there are people crossing the border to get away from the draft. But interestingly enough, if you look at these folks, they're not former military. The only people called up were former military. So the only people leaving are uneducated rope-tards who don't have jobs in Russia. To be quite honest, it looks to me like Russia's jettisoning a drag on their economy. They're also getting rid of the woke-tards, the guys who want to politicize all the wokish bullshit. So it looks like a win-win for me. You're getting rid of people who produce nothing, who are a drag on your economy and don't represent your values. Wow, imagine that. So to me, that doesn't look like a problem. But I've just spent 3 minutes, and I haven't even got to the meat of today's topic. Today's topic is Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. They have been sabotaged. They have been blown up. Someone has destroyed, or at least taken out of operation, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 coming into winter in the Baltic Sea. Now, interestingly enough, who could benefit from this? Because I know who the West is going to blame. It's going to be Putin's fault. And that is beyond lunacy, shall we say. If the Russians want to stop the gas, all they got to do is turn righty-tighty, then lefty-loosey to open it back up. But no, that's not what's happening. Now it's shut off. So who benefits from that? Well, I'll tell you who benefits from that. England benefits from that. The United States benefits from that. And Ukraine benefits from that. Now, I don't believe Ukraine has enough of a navy, especially not enough submarines right now, to take care of that. Although I'm sure, as Emil Kozman said this morning, I believe that the West is going to find that Putin dove down there with a rocket launcher and blowed him up using a rocket launcher. Because that's how the West is going to portray this. But it's in the West's benefit to see these things destroyed, because the Germans were starting to waffle. Because the Germans don't want to freeze to death. And they were willing to cave. More than likely, the politicians would cave once their people start freezing. And as long as these pipelines were in existence, as long as these pipelines were capable of delivering gas, there was an option that the EU was going to crack on that. But what you don't understand is now, because it has got to this point, because the gas reserves weren't made up. Now Germany's doomed. Absolutely. That government's not going to make it through the winter, including a lot of EU governments. Now, for those of you who haven't been watching, a conservative right-wing government has been elected in Italy. They are not going to play nice with the woke tards of the EU. Viktor Orban now has another ally in the EU, somebody who's not going to put up with all the wokish nonsense. And unfortunately, I look for a lot of people in the EU to move to Hungary, because guess what? Hungary is not going to freeze this winter. They have an overland pipeline. I also think that this pipeline and the destruction of it is really, really going to taint the already tainted legacy of Frau Merkel. I don't think that's going to look good on her in history, that she relied on these pipelines and now they're bloated up and the Germans aren't going to get gas. In fact, most of Europe is going to be in deep, deep, deep kimchi. And the Americans are going to get more money because they're going to attempt to supply gas, but the infrastructure is not there. You're not going to be able to replace the Nord Stream pipelines by putting natural gas on ships and shipping it to Europe. It's just not going to happen. So Europe, hey baby, sorry, you're about to take the big one for Ukraine. And either the Americans or the Brits are making sure it's happening. Now, if they find out and can prove who did this, I think they need to be held accountable, whether it was us, whether it was the Brits, or on the off chance that it would be the Russians, then the Russians need to be held accountable. But then again, why would the Russians do this? They simply have a hand on the tap. They can turn it off. And why spend millions of dollars to do something that you can simply do with a turn of the tap? Don't let the media screw you guys, folks. You can think just fine. All you have to do is apply a little bit. I know the media has made a lot of you folks lazy. You're willing to take whatever Ukraine vomits out to our Western press, and the Western press regurgitates it to you, instead of bothering to think, instead of bothering to have the press actually do journalism. But don't be confused. Don't be surprised, folks. This is how it is. It's going to cost millions of dollars to fix Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Millions of dollars. Now, the Russians aren't known to piss money away. They're not. So I don't see Russia damaging its own infrastructure. And it doesn't help Russia. It actually removes a bargaining chip from the table, because now there is no bargaining chip of fuel. The fuel is done. This is tantamount to Cortez reaching the New World and burning his ships, because now the EU is going to be extremely motivated to find options. Now, whether they reopen nuclear plants, whether they try to reopen coal, which if they reopen the coal-fired plants, that's going to be interesting, because who's the major supplier of coal to Europe? That would be the same people who used to supply them gas. So the sanctions will also come into it. Now, that doesn't mean that the U.S. won't throw a bunch of coal on ships and send it overseas. Good news for West Virginia, I guess. Maybe. But I don't know that the woke pedo Hitler, our president, I don't know that he will allow West Virginia to exploit its natural resources and provide jobs for the hardworking people of West Virginia. I don't think pedo Hitler is wired to be able to do that, but I could be wrong. Biden might surprise me. I mean, he did surprise me this time. He's on tape bragging about how he could shut Nord Stream down. Well, hey, he did it. Unfortunately, he telegraphed it, and those sound bites are now making the internet. And I guess if I had to pick somebody, being an American, I would have picked my own government to be the ones who destroyed the infrastructure that Europe was going to count on to keep warm. So Europe, remember this. When the United States is asking you to suffer a little more for Ukraine, just remember how your own politicians and the politicians in the U.S. are more than willing to let you suffer for Ukraine. And Americans, don't make a mistake about this. After the elections, you're going to watch your fuel prices rise, and rise exponentially. A lot of you folks aren't going to have money to go on vacation next year. Why won't you have money to go on vacation? Because you won't be able to afford the gas. Well, I'll just fly. You won't have the money to afford gas to go to the airport. And I'm not even joking about this. You're about to see things get stupid. COVID was a test run. Isn't it amazing this comes right on the heels of COVID? COVID was a test run to see how much they could get you guys to put up with. And guess what, folks? We can't afford to heat your schools. That's coming. I will almost bet we can't afford to keep the electric on in the schools. So you will have to homeschool your children. Oh, yeah, they've got the infrastructure for that. How convenient, right? How convenient. How convenient. Don't think it's possible? I'm just throwing out possible scenarios. Why? COVID was a test run to see how much you could put up with, how much they could get away with doing to you. And all they have to do now is declare an emergency, and a lot of you people will put up with absolutely outlandish bullshit that stomps on your liberty. Yes, liberty, that's actually a word. It actually fucking means something. You know, not like democracy, which democracy now literally means that you will defend fucking right-wing fucking Nazis. Nazis who fucking kill pregnant women and fucking burn people alive and all that shit. But they're Ukrainians, so they're not real Nazis. They're beautiful, pure, and great democratic people who happen to kill other people because they speak a different language or they have an ethnic background that is not the same as yours. I seem to remember somebody doing this shit before. Killing people because they ethnically weren't the same as they were. I can't remember who those people were. And, you know, I really don't have any idea who that might be. Ausländer raus. But, you know, folks, I think we're a lot closer to nuclear war than I was willing to admit a week ago. And you think the Russians are going to lay over? Russians are already saying if the Nord Stream pipelines being in international waters are fair game, then is there anything that the Americans or British put in international waters that is not fair game? And I think you folks need to understand that this could get really, really tricky. This could get really, really tricky in a heartbeat. And, you know, I can't help but think when I heard about what happened with Nord Stream today, I couldn't help but go back to one of the greatest counter-espionage rackets of all time. There was the Russians, not the Russians, the Soviets were stealing certain technology having to deal with pipelines and fuel pipelines. And we planted false information that would make a pipeline very unstable. So basically, we let the Soviets steal plans that turned their pipeline into a bomb. And after it was switched on, guess what? It blew up. I don't believe that sort of thing's the case with these pipelines. Nord Stream 1 has been in operation for months. Nord Stream 2 has been pressurized now since the fall. So the fact that they both went down within a day of each other, this isn't something that suddenly somebody flipped a switch and did. This was something that was done quite deliberate. So it's not like the West doesn't see infrastructure as a fair target. I will tell you this, if somebody blew up the Alaska pipeline, and it was seemed to be a act of sabotage. I think we'd have a problem with that. I think we'd be wanting to kick somebody's ass. The Russians, the only thing they've lost is money. Europe, we're going to suffer from this. If I was German, I'd be pissed off right now. I'd be super pissed off because you folks are about to freeze to death. And same with the Italians. The Italians are about to freeze to death. It's going to be a long, miserable, hungry winter for you folks. It's going to be interesting to see the green people deforest their countries to keep from freezing to death. We're going to be burning lots and lots and lots of wood. I bet you Woketards will really be happy about that. You're going to be putting all this terrible wood smoke into the air. By the way, that's how I heat every winter. I burn lots and lots and lots of wood. In fact, I like to use styrofoam to get it started just because it makes pretty black smoke out of my chimney. Anyhow, folks, that's all I got time for today. You guys take it easy, and I will catch you guys down the road. Adios.